it became really clear that work exists to grow the human being. JP2's quote is, "It is always the human person who is the purpose of work, that work was made for man and not man for work."
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where each week we are discussing how Catholics can run their businesses in a way that is truly aligned with our faith. And today we have a very good guest for you. We'll get into that in a second, but I just want to say before we get there, thank you so much for everybody who's constantly tuning in, giving us feedback, liking the post on Substack, sending us recommendations, sharing the content. It really means a lot to us. It's great to see other people who care about this mission, who are trying to do the same thing. Before we get into it, I also want to offer, if you are really busy and you think that these episodes are too long, feel free to give us feedback on that. We're trying to debate what's the longest, what's the best kind of form of content here. And if you do like shorter form content, we do have, we've been putting out a lot of content on Instagram and YouTube with clips from the podcast, as well as some other more practical items. So give us a follow there. Our social media person, Karen, has been doing a really, really good job of pumping that stuff out. So today we are speaking with Jeff Schiefelbein. And let me just say, I knew this was going to be a good episode because Jeff is amazing. I had the chance to meet him, but this is way, way better than I expected. I honestly, I got off the show immediately, went to my wife, and I was like, oh my goodness, Jeff is awesome. Jeff is the best. And you'll see why after you look up the show, or you listen to the show. But just to give you some context, so Jeff runs a company with his partners called Undivided Life, and it's a consulting firm to help businesses run companies that are kind of like in accordance with the life that they want to live. So there's no separation. It's not like Severance, where you have one kind of life at work and one kind of life at home. He helps people to integrate these things, and this is effectively the core of what Catholic Founders is also trying to do, which is why I think it's so awesome to have him on the show. And he, aside from running Undivided Life, they have several companies. They do a lot of investments. He runs a monthly radio show, or he hosts a monthly radio show, and has a podcast called BeatiDUDES. And he also has 7 kids. And he's just like kind of a go-getter. He does all these things, but yet he does them with charity and with love, and he's just very, very good. So I like Jeff because he's open about these things. He's open about how challenging some of these items can be, but he also really knows how to hit the nail on the head when it comes to what we need to do as Catholic entrepreneurs. And since he's a speaker, he also knows how to deliver it in a concise way. So I think you're going to appreciate the show. A couple items that we talk about. I'm just going to highlight a few of these so you get an idea. One of those is he gives some words for entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who are hesitant to start their journey. He talks about the importance of work being for humans, not work to make money or work to make some kind of impact on the world. Work is, the benefit is to us as humans, and you have to keep this in mind, especially if you're employing other people. Obviously for ourselves as well, but for in particular the way we employ others. He talks about how culture must be a core piece of you running the business. It cannot be some kind of like side project or side quest or bolt on that you think is like a benefit that you can sell. It has to be the business. It has to be the core of the business, and he explains why. He also tells us how he manages to do so many things and how he manages his time. Then he gives us plenty of stories, and I'll just mention a couple of those. One of those is how he went traveling around the country, asking restaurants for free food, and what the experience taught him. He also talks about how one of his experiences in college ended up leading him to, at God's calling, to create what ended up becoming the most successful call a ride home project for if you were out drinking or partying and you wanted to get a ride home without driving. Just the challenges he faced and how God helped him overcome those things because God wanted him to do it. So it's a very good story there. There's a lot of other items that he shares. I won't spoil the rest, but you're going to enjoy the show. I know you will. So just let us know your favorite parts after you listen. And if you're not already, go give them a follow on their YouTube channel, BeatiDUDES. That's BeatiDUDES, like Beatitudes, but BeatiDUDES. It's kind of a comedy, faith/business show. It's really, really good. And with that, we'll get into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Schiefelbein. If you've not heard of him, you're going to know him, and you're going to be happy you met him as of today. He's one of the hosts of the BeatiDUDES podcast and managing partner of Undivided Life, which we're going to learn more about today. Welcome to the show, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, and I'm glad to be with you. Thank you so much.
Did I get your last name pronunciation correct?
You got BeatiDUDES correctly, but I say my last name, I say Schiefelbein.
Schiefelbein.
But I think I'm the problem. I don't think I say it correctly. So
I was going to ask you that because I feel like I heard you say Schiefelbein, but I was like, in German it'd be Schiefelbein. But
Germans, they're not very happy with how much I've texified the word, but that's all right.
That's all right, man. You can do your Texas thing all
So
you like.
it's a family curse. It means crooked leg. And I had my first torn ligaments in 5th grade, and I've had 5 knee surgeries on one and one on the other. So I'm telling you, it's like something about my lineage is truly crooked leg.
That's crazy. Very good. Well, I hope that gets straightened out. No pun intended.
Aha.
In the future. uh, all right, very good. Well, we've got a lot of different topics we're going to talk about for Catholic business owners, and I think we'll get into that in a bit. But I do want to understand. I actually haven't talked to you much about this, but can you just tell us a little bit more about what you are doing and what Undivided Life is?
You bet. I'll try to oversimplify this for the sake of podcasting. Undivided Life is a consulting business that me and my partner started a little over 2 years ago. And the idea is all around how to create really healthy, scalable growth for organizations, with human flourishing being just as important. Not one or the other, but both together. And growth could be earnings, or it could be mission impact, or it could be any of the metrics that matter to you. Really, that's it. It's like this is a way of doing business, living an undivided life, creating cultures where human beings get to thrive and be formed. For secular audiences, that's all they need to know. For a Catholic audience, I talk about the fact that this is not my playbook. This is the social teachings of the Catholic Church that illuminate the gospel teachings of Jesus Christ. And in that process, we figure out what is the vocation of the business leader and how can we play our role to evangelize through the way that we work. In a nutshell, that's it. But I will say it has all these bolt-ons. We own and manage different podcasts. I have an entire speaking circuit that I'm on, lots of content and classes and teaching that we do. And then we also own a holding company that we call Undivided Life Holdings that allows us to buy organizations, build organizations, or bless organizations by coming in as a minority partner. So that the buy, build, bless is kind of the model there. But it's really just because we love doing this stuff so much that we don't want to just be advisors. We also like being practitioners. So we have several things cooking all day, every day, and that really fits my brain well. I love it.
No, I feel like that's the dream I want to have. I want to have all these things. I'm constantly trying to do the thing where I focus more. Focus is definitely not my strong suit as a man with a substantial amounts of ADHD.
Yeah.
Of course, in my veins. But why did you choose the name Undivided?
Yeah. I was an entrepreneur for most of the last 26 years. Even when I was within an organization, I was always testing and launching new things, kind of as an entrepreneur. And in this pattern that I was in, it's like I was getting to live in fast forward in some levels. I got a chance to have exposure to large bank accounts and travel and authority and local fame, bigger fame, and lots of things that were very worldly, and none of it satisfied me. And at the same time, I was going through what I would just call like a deepening of my faith because I wasn't that well catechized growing up. And I was learning about, what is it to really understand the saints? What does it look like to be at daily mass and to get into deep prayer? And along that path, you end up starting to read stuff that does connect with you better, whether that's scripture or you're connecting to somebody like Andres Wittemer's Pope and the CEO, or I can remember a couple different times I would read an encyclical and I'd be like, I think I get this, but I can tell that there's these standards here. And then there was a publication released maybe a little over 10 years ago called The Vocation of the Business Leader. And it's just a 30-page summation of the encyclicals and the writings and work of JP2 so that we understand as business leaders what is our call and vocation for common good, subsidiarity, solidarity, justice, just wages, human dignity. And every single word of it, I just had these light bulbs like, this is it. This is the combination of me reading about virtuous leadership and studying all these organizations that have no faith basis, but I could just see this common thread. And the opening page, like the foreword, says, the divided life is the bane of man's existence, that the divided life is what is causing this turmoil, this conflict, this wasted energy. It's really that we're not a bifurcated soul, so why do we act that way in our workplaces? And I was already a speaker at that point. I was already pushing, the envelope on how to create thriving organizational cultures. But I started adding in this concept of we're called to live an undivided life. And then just to make a long story short, 9 years ago, I got asked if I wanted to have a monthly show on the local Catholic radio, the live station. And my wife, having listened to me on the phone so often, said, you ought to name your show Undivided Intention, because you're all about intentionality and living undivided. So that show's still going today. And as I was discerning leaving my last company, I was running my own energy company with awesome partners, and we were growing like crazy, doing energy consulting. I went on this speaking bender once. It was 7 talks in 6 days all over America, all different audiences, Catholic, secular, high school, professional, in studio, on some UN podcast. I mean, it was the weirdest mix. And I said, I'm going to name every single one of these speeches Living an Undivided Life. And at the end of this 7 days, I will either stop considering any exit from my company, or I will announce to my wife and then to my business partners that the end is coming soon. And it was so fulfilling that living an undivided life is applicable everywhere for every person. So there's your genesis of the name.
Yeah, I love it. I think I haven't seen the show, but I've heard there's a very popular show called Severance right now, and I think
I've heard of it. I've not seen it. Yeah.
Isn't the idea that they kind of like they get to just kind of check out at work and then they can go home and actually live their lives, and they kind of have this like complete separation of work versus personal life. And I think, obviously I haven't seen the show, so I maybe can't comment too much on it, but it just is interesting that it's so popular today, considering the fact that there's so many people doing this. There's so many people who think that they can just, put on one hat during the day and then put on another hat at night. But it's like this whole idea of trying to separate these things doesn't make sense, because we are at the basis of everything. We're human, right? And we have to live as humans with, eternity in mind.
Don't you think like conflict is very exhausting? Like if you and I had a conflict and we were coworkers, it would occupy some part of my mental energy and some part of my relationship energy and some part of my gossip energy. Like I'm just saying, conflict is not a place that we can really thrive. It's not the best version of us. But to live a divided life, one that we know that in order to rise up through the ladder, I need to check myself at the door. If I'm going to be Christian, just make it very palatable that Christianity just means being a nice person. Don't worry about sacraments. Certainly don't get into all this stuff about Catholicism. Like, just keep it very easy peasy. And that way you can rise through the ranks. And then when you go home, if you have extra energy or time, sure, go ahead and make faith or family a priority. You just created a conflict in yourself. So the energy that I have to expend if I have conflict with you is nothing compared to the energy that almost everybody we know is dealing with on putting on the next hat, adjusting to this is my language when I'm with my college buddies versus my kids versus my boss, and I need to go along to get along. But brother, how many people, if you sat here and asked a bunch of men and women, 60 to 80 years old, are you grateful that you lived a divided life? I've never heard anybody say, I'm so thankful that I shut it down every day for 40 hours a week or more, and that I would find different ways to put on the new hat and live this completely severed life. Maybe it makes for great TV. Maybe there's people that look like they're having fun on Instagram. I've never met anybody who's actually fulfilled in any of that.
No, amen. That's definitely how it is. I had this kind of mindset or principle that I came up with for myself earlier on in life, which is I did like a mini podcast series on it, and it was just about this idea that Zoomers or Gen Z people have such a difficulty in life right now because there's so many conflicting ideas about how they should live. But if you think about it, just look at the end of life and then look back and say, what do I want to live? Like, what do I want my daily or my weekly schedule to be, so that way I choose to live that life, because I can maybe achieve goals and I can achieve certain kind of outcomes, but if I'm not enjoying the weekly grind, I'm probably going to be very unhappy through periods of life.
If you did that right now and somebody said, do that exercise, do you think anybody would come out the other end and say, I want my kids to resent that I wasn't around when they were 8 to 18 years old because I was so focused on making a name for myself, or fill in the blank on what you want? And the reverse is also true. When I first started dating my wife, I mean, literally our very first date, we did that same vision exercise, but we said, we both felt very called to get married. We'd known each other for about 6 months before our first date. And on that date, we pictured a backyard so full of grandkids that we were going to have trouble naming them. Well, if that's true, then either through birth or adoption, we should probably have a bunch of kids. So then when you have that end goal in mind, there are days that are very, very difficult to figure out how are you even keeping it together as a parent? How are you even still awake? But that's not the end of this. That's a moment. It's something I should cherish because it's helping us build towards the vision that we've always had. And God willing, I wake up tomorrow and I get to keep building that.
Mhm. So I appreciate that. I did a little bit of investigative research, and I
No,
understand that there was a period of time where you only wore football cleats all the time, no matter what. Tell me more about this.
man, that's funny. When I started college, I've always kind of, you know, put on my own version of like life, right? I don't conform very often unless it's something I feel like doing, but I would ask myself like why. And I can remember wearing football cleats for football, and I liked the way that it was really easy to move in them. I thought they were extremely comfortable. I always thought like if I needed to run or somebody was going to attack me, I probably looked really foreboding with football cleats on. I was a pretty big guy. But I loved going to like dance clubs and stuff when I was in college. And, in Texas, if you wear cowboy boots, those can slide around a little bit. You can move a little bit, but they could also be really uncomfortable if you're going to be on them all night. I just would wear cleats to the club, and they were perfect for dancing. People would be like, "Do you play football?" And I'm like, "No, I don't play football, but I love these cleats." So it was weird, and I did it for many years. But thanks for your investigative journalism. That's awesome.
I've got one more for you. I understand that you also traveled the country asking restaurants for free food, and
Yeah.
I just want to understand what was behind that. What was the purpose there?
Man, when I was starting my sophomore year at Texas A&M, I got in some really big trouble. I was guilty of driving while intoxicated, and by God's grace, without being in an accident, I was arrested. And I had a chance to press restart on just healthier living. And so as part of that, I can remember going to a hangout with one of my friends, and he's like, "Man, why don't we go down to Mardi Gras on the Gulf Coast? We're going to have a blast this weekend." I said, "Dude, I can't get in any trouble. Like, that sounds terrible." He said, "Well, you got a better idea?" And I said, "Yes." And I don't know what hit me. Maybe I just read Jack Kerouac or something. I said, "Let's just travel from here to some direction and live out of our car." And I said, "We can take money for gas, but everything else, whether we stay in a nice bed or we get a good meal or anything else, besides gas, 100% of what we're going to get is going to be because we ask for and work for our food." And he goes, "We're going to Four Corners, USA, where the 4 states meet, and we're going to play cards." So we just started driving. What ended up being the result of that was a lot of hunger in the first 16 hours until I got some stale donuts. But that helped me to get up the courage to go into the University of New Mexico cafeteria the next morning and talk to those ladies. And I said, "Look, we don't have any money, but we're willing to wash dishes or, clean the windows or something." And they said, "Just come on in and sit down and you guys take a load off." And by that point, we had picked up another guy along the way. It was a very short little adventure, and we met amazing people, and we got to do a little bit of work for our food, but most people, it's like a third, a third, a third. A third of the people rejected us. A third of the people gave us food with just the story we shared, and then a third would have us do some sort of exercise. So we had about $2 on us, and it was really like kind of a joke. We took this change that we had, and when we were driving home, we just threw it out the window and said that we were going to save it because we were going to go to California that summer. And brother, we went to California for weeks and back and forth between Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, California, and we slept on the beach. We slept in the MGM Grand. We got put on the audience for Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher and got called out by him. And we were eating just off of Rodeo Drive, and then we were going starving hungry because we'd get rejected 4 or 5 times in a row. We met people at the park who came back and brought their kids to play jacks with us or play guitar or take us out for coffee. And you just find out that people are people. So then everybody said, "Well, that's the West Coast. Those people are nicer." So then the next time we could, the next year, we drove out to South Carolina, up to Boston, back to South Carolina, and back, having the most incredible adventure. I ended up on MTV for the first time, on Total Request Live, wearing the same clothes I'd been wearing for 10 days. We hung out with, people in Ivy League colleges, and again, slept on beaches and this is so wild. I'm just remembering this. At the University of North Carolina, whatever, I can't remember which one of these cities it's in, but one of their offshoots, somebody just asked, "Where are you guys staying?" And I said, "That Chevy S10 Blazer over there." And so they hooked us up with showers in the green room of their local theater, and then set us up with an apartment that nobody was using that night. So we got a good night's sleep, but just living it, brother. And I learned more about sales and encountering human beings and human nature by living out of a car where I didn't care what I looked like. I didn't care about being cool. I cared about encountering people and looking people in the eye, making an honest request, and then waiting for their answer. And if they rejected me, I gave them the same appreciation as somebody who turned around and gave us a giant meal.
Hey, everybody, I got a quick ask for you. So, along with this kind of conversation we're talking about today with Jeff on the importance of work for the human, not work to benefit just to make money or to do other things. Work is good for the human. My assistant, Karen, and I are trying to build this thing called the Paraclete VA. And what it basically is there's a lot of virtual assistants in the Philippines who are Catholic, who are working for companies that are asking them to do things that are not always in alignment with their Catholic morals. They're not necessarily directly against it, but they're things that, they're not great, or they're not being treated very well, because a lot of these people view hiring overseas as kind of just a way to exploit cheap labor. Now, these families need to they need to make money so they can put bread on the table and feed the families. They cannot just afford to quit their job. They need better employment, and a lot of them are seeking employment. Many of them have reached out to Karen to, ask, does she know any other Catholic entrepreneurs overseas who are willing to hire these people? So if this is you, if you're interested in hiring overseas talent, you can reach out to us today with a little bit about what you're looking for, and we will make an introduction to you on, somebody who might be able to fulfill this need. The way it works is we charge $500 for an introduction for once you hire them. If you hire them and you're happy, after 30 days, then we charge another $500. We are not an employer of record, so you will pay them directly. We'll help you facilitate that and give you best practices, but we will just make an introduction basically to these people who have amazing skills, who can help you with your business, help you move forward at an affordable rate. That's also allowing them to, get paid what they need to provide for their families, and to, again, most importantly, be able to work with people who value them as humans. So if this is something you're interested in doing or you feel called to, reach out at dearcfpod@gmail.com with a little bit about what you're looking for, and we'll make an introduction. All right, back to the show. Yeah, no, I think this is amazing. I'm always curious about people who do these kind of things. Like, is this something that this has kind of been your personality to do these type of things? And it sounds like you already gave us the takeaways of the trip and the things you learned. But how about entrepreneurs who, like, you obviously have something different about you? A lot of people don't necessarily feel that. I sometimes don't feel that. I feel
Sure.
like there's something different, but maybe not the same way it's different about you. So should entrepreneurs just or if you want to be an entrepreneur, just pursue doing something kind of wild like this?
I wouldn't say that. I think there's different kinds of entrepreneurs too, right? You don't have to have the same temperament as me to be a successful entrepreneur and to make an impact for your family or for others. But in my case, I think what I found very early on was a high degree of skepticism when people told me that things had to be a certain way or they couldn't be another way. And so I think God planted in me a countercultural or adversarial mindset, like why? I just wanted to ask why. And my rule of thumb is, if you tell me something can't happen, you've just now piqued my curiosity. Like, you can't do X. I'll say, why? And this happens all the time. I'm talking about really good stuff, right? Even our podcast, I was told you can't do it the way you're going to do it. And I said, why? And the more I ask why, most people prove to me exactly what I'm supposed to go do by telling me all this stuff, all the reasons you can't do something. And I just reverse engineer what they just said. But I guess I could probably, if I thought hard enough, come up with conclusions where somebody told me that why something couldn't work and I believed them. But it is really, really rare. From launching technologies within a company to, somebody said you couldn't make money podcasting until you had X number of downloads and you get certain dollars per whatever. And I was like, why? And this eventually turns out it's because that's the way people do it. I thought that was a pretty bad reason. So we went and got sponsors and said, do you want to be a part of this? This cable right here, this cable that plugs my mic in, these mics, they're nice, right? I didn't even know it, but a Shure SMB7's a good mic. We had 2 national sponsors before I owned these cables. I had to look up what cables to buy to plug this mic in, and those sponsors have stayed with us. So,
yeah. No, I think this is a good, I guess you could say, lesson that you could transfer over to being a Catholic entrepreneur in general. It's like there's so many reasons why many people. Well, actually, maybe we'll just jump ahead to this because I think it's a good time to bring it up. Is if you're a family man, if you've got kids and you've got a wife and you got to provide, you might have an interest in starting a business, but there's so many reasons. Oh, I can't do that. It's just too risky. Can you talk about how would you talk to somebody like that who they seem to have some kind of tug on their heart, but they're making all these excuses? Why not?
First of all, I would ask, like, the people that are telling you that things can't happen are usually talking about themselves, right? So you got to ask yourself, where is this coming from? Not that they have ill will towards you, but I can remember as a business manager being told you can't be friends with people you manage. And as I asked why, I realized the guy saying it to me couldn't be friends with people he managed. And so I was like, no, you can't. I can, you can't. I have the skills and the intention to go through that. Well, the same thing happens with you can't have a family until you've made it, or you can't launch a business when your family's depending on you. And if you ask why a bunch, it's usually people's own fear that is what their answer is rooted in. So there, Silas, I would go into what is fear. And our fear, in the most practical version, before I get into my faith component of it, our fear isn't of failure or of pain. Our fears are like that you go to worst case scenario and then you actually fear that you can't handle it. Because look, if you got in a car accident today and you lost your leg, you could have the fear of driving and you could have the fear that you can't handle it. But the truth is you'd learn to live with one leg. If you went bankrupt in your business, well, you know what you would do? You would file for bankruptcy. You would, retool your lifestyle. You would figure out what expenses were mission critical and you'd stick with those, and then you'd go get a job. You can absolutely survive these things. You can survive the loss of a loved one. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's fun, and I don't want it. But if we live in fear, then we never do anything that isn't what everybody else is doing. So there's this kind of race to mediocrity and to make sure that nothing is ever high or low. And I actually have found that living my life where I'm not afraid of highs and lows has made most of my days memorable and not just meshed together into one blah memory. And that makes life feel longer and more enriching to me. Okay, so if I'm saying you're not going to get over the fear, so you should just do it anyways, like move past it because it's going to be there no matter what. For the Christian, if the ultimate fear is death or loss of a loved one or even pain and suffering, we know that this is all the refiner's fire to get us to something that's always going to be better than where we are now. God willing, we make it there, right? The valley of tears is ours to walk through. You're going to do it. You're going to fail. You're going to lose accounts and money and loved ones. Whether you're an entrepreneur or not, like life is going to be up and down and hard. So then the most practical version is, okay, well, if that's not going away, then what am I going to do about it? I'm going to keep discerning. And through my own process of hearing where the Holy Spirit is pulling me and thinking through the most practical version of risk reward, there's really not that much risk. If one more practical thing, if you've ever worked for somebody or in a company before and you made X amount of money, and then you go become an entrepreneur and you fail, and then you're in a bad spot and you need to go back and you need to get back to money and benefits or whatever, you know how to get back to where you were. You got there for a reason before. So your fear should be that your worst case scenario is finding your way back to where you were before. Maybe a different company, maybe even a different industry, but you know how to do some things. So you can find it.
Yeah, this is a really good thing. It's interesting you bring this up because it was a mentor of mine walking me through his imagination of the worst case scenario for himself before he started his own business that made me do the exercise myself. And I was like, oh yeah, I could deal with that. Like it wasn't even that bad. It was like nothing. I was like, oh yeah, worst case scenario, I have to go live with my parents. Like, I burn all my money and I go get another job again. It's like not the end of the world. And the other thing is after I started becoming an entrepreneur myself, I realized job security is way more of a myth than you think.
Oh yeah.
Because nobody, most companies unfortunately do not care about people, which maybe brings us to our next topic, which is, I guess, talk to us a little bit about why we work.
Yeah, I love you've done good research, Silas. I'm feeling good about this. So this dawned on me in a non-Catholic way first. I kind of figured this out by working with so many people. I mean, by the time I was 23, I'd probably hired, managed, and or at some points had to fire. I didn't fire this many people, but I had probably at that point managed hundreds of people between companies I'd started, the role I was put in at Frito-Lay, just different pockets that I was given tremendous responsibility. And so I did some things the wrong way and I did some things the hard way, but I also got some things right. Part of it by accident, part of it by just, again, being very rational, extremely common sense focused. And it became really clear that work exists to grow the human being. Like JP2's quote is, "It is always the human person who is the purpose of work, that work was made for man and not man for work." So if it's always the human person that is the purpose, then that means you're the purpose of work and I'm the purpose of work, and the boss that you think is a jerk is the purpose, and the brand new person who just joined from college and thinks they know a lot more than they probably do, they're all the purpose of work. And so therefore, that helps me to unlock subsidiarity and to give true responsibility and decision-making authority to the people around me, because the purpose of work is not to be right. The purpose of work is not to do it well. It's not to have 2x your earnings on your balance sheet that year. I mean, it's like those things are outcomes, right? Enjoying your work, hitting your numbers, not hitting your numbers, failing at a project. Those are all just outcomes, and they don't even have to have emotions tied to them. The purpose of work is the formation of that human person and their inherent dignity so that they can be created and cultivated and carved by God's hands, not yours, to become who God's intended them to be. And that's why dignified work matters. And dignified work can be the janitor, it can be the CPA, it can be the CEO, but it doesn't happen when we misplace, as many people do, that work is just about making money. This company exists only to make money, that you need to do it my way because my way is the right way, that there's some sort of, fear of ever getting it wrong, and therefore nobody ever takes that risk to do something that's even perhaps more impactful and game-changing, because when you're afraid all the time because you're doing it wrong or you got to get it right, you end up just being like everybody else. You're really being micromanaged in some ways. So I'm rambling here, but to tell you, I've seen it left and right. When I stop trying to label people's work as output-based, and instead we focus on the input, the excellence of the input, the excellence of the effort, then you get to watch that person is becoming in themselves more of a human being. And that's not my words. Again, this is JP2. By becoming more of a human being, by getting more focused on humanity, do you know what ends up happening? We end up having people that are better thinkers, and they own the output more, and they care more about not just their job, but plus everything else they can do. And if you do that with a whole team of people, you create teamwork that is thriving. And it's not a prosperity gospel. It's literally saying if you treated everybody this way, the odds are that you're going to make it through the biggest trials and be able to capitalize on great opportunities in your marketplace, and that your culture and your teamwork is a form of recruiting that is unlike any other strategic advantage in the marketplace, are all true. So therefore, you have a higher likelihood of succeeding in those metrics that you care about for your mission or for your business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I want to ask you about this. So this morning, I was thinking about this idea of in life where our core objective is obviously to pursue heaven, right? And core to being human is the fact that we have free will. Like God gave us free will so that we can basically come to know Him, right? That's the whole. It's kind of just a journey. And I was wondering, I was wondering if, as humans, is the objective here to, as you say, kind of develop the human experience and to fully enter into it because that's what brings us closer to God? Or is it just to kind of set that all aside? Don't worry about the mentality stuff, the meditation things. Just focus on, hey, I'm going to try to, follow the books and get to heaven.
That's a good question. So I think, I'm going to take this from the viewpoint of a business leader or an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, I have 7 employees on this payroll, and across all of our companies, it's more like 60 employees. So there's a lot of people counting on us. We don't save people. We don't heal people. We don't get to play God's role in any of this, but we can create fertile soil, and we should. We should be the ones who are coming in and saying that this environment and the way in which we operate and the modeled behavior by which we encounter people, or especially when we face the hardest problems with vendors and employees, when we fire people and talk about ex-employees, like the nastiest stuff of our business, that is the fertile soil that allows us to make disciples of all nations by just creating the environment for the Holy Spirit to go to work on people. And then I tell this to people all the time, let's say that you're an incredible leader and people are coming to know God because they see the face of Jesus in the way that you operate and interact with them, but you're not continuing to grow closer to Christ, and you're not continuing to pursue every single day your prayer, your relationship, your formation. you eventually will have, in pretty short order, you'll eventually have, I think, a message that doesn't really add up, because it has to be genuine with you. You could be sitting here converting hearts left and right, and if it's not your heart that's continuing to be formed, then I don't think I want to follow that leader, and I don't think that's what God's calling us to be. I think it always starts with you and Christ, and that way you can be a better conduit. You can be a better tiller of the soil for all the others. And I hope I answered your question. I mean, the free will part of that is so huge. It's like, I run an organization right now. They're one of our clients, the Catholic Pro-Life Community of Dallas. So I have 23 employees over there, and I'm their executive director as this advisory role that we have. And we have some literature that says our healing after abortion retreats, will say, we heal, blah, blah, blah. And we all sat there and said, no, we don't. We don't heal anybody. Only Christ can heal. Only the Holy Spirit can come in and create that healing moment. We create environments of healing. We create pathways so that you can hear the Holy Spirit and reconnect to your aborted child and to God's mercy and sacramental grace for you as a forgiven son or daughter of Christ. But we don't heal. And that's the free will part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think a little bit about this dilemma. And I think we talked about this a little bit at the Sense conference last year, is this idea of people talk a lot about high agency, right? And as entrepreneurs, we tend to be, high agency people generally. But being created in the image and likeness of God is the way I try to visualize it is, it's not about how we look or, how we talk. It's about the fact that we can be co-creators with God inside of what he's created for us, right? So entrepreneurs, in their very sense, are very close to this, right? This entrepreneurship of creating things, right? But if you recognize what you're just saying, it's like, we can't really do anything. We're always tools. We're always just being conduits. And to what extent we do things on our own, quote unquote, we're not really doing them on our own. So I don't know if, doesn't this create some sort of dilemma? Like, as an entrepreneur, I want to go build something. I want to go stamp my name on something. But in reality, we're just using skills that God gave us. Like, how do you visualize that?
Yeah. If you don't make time for patience, prayer, silence, solitude, like the times when God can speak to you more clearly, then I think you're more likely to find yourself not following God's will and trying to muscle your way through something. You can really feel it a lot when something is kind of going well or looks like it might work out, and you start to have that really big ego tug. Instead of the ego that's always there, it starts to be, I'm so great. And that's a check yourself moment, that why are you doing this? And what is it that you think you're doing, and who is it for? We are co-creators. God uses us as his instruments, but our free will allows us to not do it. It allows us to turn our back on the opportunity. And we get those opportunities not just in the big things like, oh, I created an app for people to pray or have their holy habits or whatever it is. It's actually the most small individual encounters are also the time where we get to figure out, are we doing this with and for God? Or is this somehow positioning ourselves for our own glory, reading our own press? And as entrepreneurs, just like that fear is never going away, I would venture to say that ego is never going away either. So you got to figure out, how am I going to operate with it so that I can keep it in check, so I can avoid, I think about that near occasion of sin. Can I avoid the things that in the past have inflated the ego? Because if I can avoid those and still do my job well, like maybe it's if I get done giving a speech and everybody's cheering for me, I spend that time writing handwritten notes to people that don't expect to get it from me, because it grounds me back to the people that I want to show my love and appreciation for, instead of scrolling around trying to see how many people are posting about my talk on social media, right? Like, what an interesting way to get to the hotel and turn that into a time of reflection. Maybe you're journaling a prayer to God and not reveling in how great you were just now on stage.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the only way, this is what I keep coming to with all these discussions, is the only way to check yourself on these items. I like the fact that you appear to think that it's not, the ego never goes away fully, but the only way to check yourself is to schedule in time to reflect. Because most people, I think, who have good intention, if they take a moment to reflect on, like, hey, what's going on here, they will realize, oh, no, this is not me, right? This is God. But not in the moment. Like, in the moment, it's hot, it's going on, it's amazing. You're like, oh man, this is great. I love all the praise. But then when you take a second to reflect, you can remember, hey, I know these things. Like, at the end of the day, this is not me.
Silas, like our words have such a big impact on how we feel and think and how other people interact with us, right? Words matter big time. You can watch Chris Stefanik. Have you ever seen somebody say some sort of a compliment to him or to give him some piece of news that his very first words aren't praise God? And I think at some level it feels like a catchphrase, but there was some point in his development where Chris Stefanik said, every time I get applauded, I will say praise God, because I'm not going to ever say, yeah, I crushed it. I guarantee he still has that moment, right? He's human, but praise God. Okay, now I've just placed this out there. Even if I'm having to just use it as a muscle memory moment, praise God, thanks be to God. And then you can get into it. And I think if we really start to be intentional about adjusting that muscle memory so that our language is always God first, then we're less likely to slip down that path into an overtake of our ego.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Let's talk about work culture. A lot of people, I'm a recruiter. That's what I do for work right now. And a lot of people, like to talk about culture. And I have obviously my own opinions. I know you do too. But people kind of view it as like this bolt on to the business. Like, oh, this is a benefit. It's a perk.
Yeah.
But can you talk about your perspective on it? And in particular, I want to know how you view it as a Catholic on maybe you employ people. I don't know if you guys do. Maybe you employ people who aren't Catholic. But how do we make a culture where we live in a way that will touch the lives of other people, like Jesus will touch the lives of others through us?
I think about this all day, every day. I told you we do culture and growth consulting is kind of the best way I say this. But I've also found that the next sentence out of my mouth better be about growth, because if it's about culture, 98% of the people in my life, even the ones that love culture, they misplace it and they start to downgrade the impact. So somebody says, oh, tell me about culture. And I will immediately just talk about growth, about how you can have this incredible impact and you can grow your client count or your number of moms served or whatever it is. And then people will say, okay, and then the culture part of it, I'm like, yep, I'm glad you're saying that, because what we can do is build every single step of our process, from our job posting to the way that we fire people and every single piece of it in between and every stakeholder. We can be so intentional about human flourishing that we're creating an environment where people are being formed and bringing their best self to work every single day. And people are like, oh, that's cool. But if I started off by talking about culture, people are like, yeah, we had a cool program and we do birthday celebrations. And I'm like, dude, that has nothing to do with this. So I'm pretty sure someday Peter Drucker's people are going to call me and tell me to stop saying this. But that culture eats strategy for breakfast drives me nuts, because that somehow separates culture and strategy, where Netflix said culture is the strategy of how you do work, that they're so intertwined that people, culture, and strategy are just three strands of the same cord. And when you hyper-focus on all three, you understand the balance that people, culture, and strategy is everything. Okay, well, now we can build incredible organizations. And I didn't even say Catholic in there to start to tie this into your second part of that question. If I care about people, strategy, and culture, and I recognize that even are we going to use the EOS program for our quarterly rocks to build up to our annual plan? That's a cultural decision you made, because it has certain cadence to it. It has certain language to it. It has certain expectations. That's all culture. Or we're not going to have anything. Well, that's a culture decision too. So in my last company, I had recruited most of the first 60 or 70 employees, and they spanned from Mexico City to New York City. And I had people from left and right of center, and then extremely left and right of center, and some that were, advocates and voices in the marketplace for either side. And I found that if we focus as Catholic leaders on the unique attributes of a human being, like what makes you tick, what exhausts you, what are you prioritizing in your life, and I can just be curious. Doesn't mean I have to agree, doesn't mean it has to match my lifestyle. For me to be curious about you, that when you feel heard, when you feel seen, now all of a sudden you open up and you want to know more about the other person. Now you understand that you're in a relationship where you're cared about. Doesn't mean I agree with your lifestyle choices, votes, and what crazy things you might be writing or saying in the public square, although I do have to put a little bit of, pump the brakes on what some people put out in the market, because you can get yourself in some pretty hot water. But I don't have to agree with any of that stuff to love you. And so if you knew that I cared about you and this happened left and right, that's a nice little pun. If you knew I cared about you, and then you knew that there was other people that we have been coaching and working with that also care about you and care about each other, now all of a sudden we can have real conversations about what are we doing here on earth? What are we pursuing? Because there isn't a single person that we know who isn't actually pursuing the same thing as us. They might just be pointed in a different direction. They might be practicing it differently. They may be further along. They may be completely off base, but I think they're pursuing the same desire for meaning and truth.
It's interesting because at the end of the day, if we all have this mark of God in our souls, right? No matter what your life looks like, deep down everybody has that, right? So as long as what you're saying, if I try to like kind of visualize this for myself, is if regardless of the political leanings of your employees or whatnot, they all have this desire deep down, and if you just go down to this kind of core, you're going to be able to be perceived as a good leader. You're going to be able to demand the respect and also make them feel very fulfilled at work, regardless of what these other things are. And that could be, an opportunity to then get them to ask you maybe, why are you the way you are?
Yeah.
And then you can, of course, share this idea of evangelization, like, through a loudspeaker versus, one-on-one over coffee is to me the biggest challenge. Cause like everybody wants to be like, oh yeah, we're just going to go like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example of one of the apostles or something, just like converting thousands just by speaking a nice speech. But most of the time,
jumping up in the town square. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, I really appreciate that. I think that's good framing. I guess for maybe one last point on this would be for people who are either running a business now or considering to do it. What are some of like the basic tactics that you would say that here's the things you absolutely should consider in terms of how you structure things in your business to make sure that culture is really kind of at the center of it?
Yeah, we did a class yesterday for a utility. So it's all their top leaders. There's hundreds of people there. And we did this class, and it's probably our 5th time to meet with them. And it's abundantly clear that they've now started to all click the light bulb on that the soft skills of culture building matched with the technical skills from engineering and ops and all that stuff, that when you put them together, it's explosive in a great way. We saw it firsthand yesterday. And I turned to my coworker, Cody, who was doing this class with me, and I said, isn't it funny? Every single topic that we share with them all comes back to coaching, to creating a culture of coaching. And coaching is typically a one-to-one encounter that has nothing to do with the tactics or the operational proficiencies of somebody. It has to do with unlocking their communication, their effectiveness, their relationships, their mindset towards others, towards conflict, towards progress, towards team. And coaching turns out to be an incredibly common sense based interaction that we've been deprogrammed to have. We've been programmed to have this, are you meeting your KPIs? Let's check in every 2 weeks and do all this X, Y, and Z. And those things are fine. But without having any coaching, it's so dehumanizing that you're just a cog and you get burned out because there's no dignity in it. But if you have coaching and this excellence in the work mindset, if you can put both of those together, people care about me. We're all in this together. I'm sharing in a conversation that other people are going through growth too. I just had this yesterday. I got to share this with you. No organization where 2 people were having about a month and a half of just, it wasn't going well. They both got coached separately. So I coached their coach. They both got coached separately. And then they got coached together. Their coach worked with them in a 3-way conversation, unlocked everything because they were able to go through mindset and perspective, words and meaning, setting the table and owning both sides of the conversation, and then a shared vision of what's possible. So my number one thing would be coaching is not because somebody needs repair, and it's not just for executives. A culture of coaching changes everything.
And to make that, I guess, tangible for somebody, it's like coaching, if they're not familiar with it, if they're not a trained coach or something, that's just, spending time with your employees kind of one-on-one and getting to like recognize their dignity and then try to help them towards their thing and having that empathy. Is that a good summarization?
Yeah. And break away from the tactical. Like, I need to manage you. And maybe I'm even coaching cross where you're not my employee, you're somebody else's employee, but it's an investment in you, the person. And the questions are really deeper and probing and require follow-up, not box checking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, box checking is I mean, it's just like the spiritual life, right? A lot of especially traditional Latin Mass Catholics where I grew up going are very much about, like, oh, I follow all the rules, right?
Sure.
And then they forget that it's at the end of the day, it's just meant to allow the seeds to take root in your soul, right? So that you have that relationship with God. But
We can
let's
say
move
that
on to a
about
little
we
bit
can say
of
that about everybody, actually.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know actually how many kids you have. Is it seven, six or
7
seven?
kids, yeah.
Seven kids. So you've got a lot of different businesses going on, a lot of different things we talked about at the beginning, and you've got seven kids. How have you managed, I guess, sanity slash just trying your best to be good at everything and do your best at everything with so many things going on? And
Yeah.
a little bit of preface to this is the reason I ask is I meet many people who seem to believe that with their amount of time, you and I have the same amount of time in a week, that they can't start a business. They can't do this. They can't do this like, small group on a monthly basis. They can't commit to it. And I find people severely lacking ambition with how they use their time. But you obviously are an example of somebody who uses your time very, very well. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. First is people do things that they think they are the ones who are supposed to be doing it and they're important in doing it, right? So in starting a business, in trusting things at home, some people are afraid of letting go of responsibility or going back to what we said earlier about that work and responsibility are a place of forming somebody else. We should give real responsibility to the people around us. And that includes our kids, because we're not raising kids, we're raising future adults. And so they might not do the dishes as well as you. They may not clean up the table as well as you. But if you never have them have the responsibility of doing those things, then they're going to be ill-equipped later in life. So first of all, I would say empower people. If the concept of subsidiarity is overwhelming to you, just think about empowering people and trusting them to do whatever they're going to do. That most people don't have ill will and aren't going to purposely ruin your home or your business. Give them incredible amounts of trust and show them, what the expectation of the outcome is, but love them even when they don't meet that expectation, because what did we learn every time we had expectations and outcomes and we either met them, exceeded them, or didn't meet them? Like, that's just logic. That's number one. Number two, we all have the same amount of time. I have very few conversations in my day that aren't of substance. I call it the no layups policy. We're not going to sit around and talk about the weather and the sports that are happening and, whether or not the weather was different yesterday. Like, at some point, let's talk about something that's real. Like, why don't I walk up to you after we've just heard a speaker at Cent Ventures conference and say, what about that talk was challenging to you? And when you listen to that and think about your life, what is God teaching you right now? I promise if I asked you those two questions, you and I would have such an incredible conversation, just like we've had before, that now we don't have to wait months and months of sitting around talking about nothing to start to earn trust together. We can just dive straight into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have very few conversations that aren't formative. Empower people, great conversations. And the last part is, if I can detach my emotional connection to failure, then I can do a lot more in a day, because I'm not wearing some weird weight looking in the rearview mirror because something I tried or wanted or applied for or sold didn't work out. It's just, what did I learn? Share it openly and vulnerably. Make sure everybody else is on the same page. Like, hey guys, let me tell you what I messed up just 2 days ago. Tell my whole team. They're like, oh, cool. Why did you do this? I did it here. Okay, cool. Let's go. And now it's done. I don't have to carry it around.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very, very helpful. On this idea of committing to things that you think may be out of your realm, people are like, oh, I'm so comfortable with the way my family life is. If I start a business, I won't have time. But at the end of the day, we talked about this before, you have to have trust in God. And I didn't ask you about this before, but I'm assuming you have plenty of stories of you doing something that didn't feel like you maybe had fear about it, but then God pulled through. Could you give us just at least maybe one of these stories of in your entrepreneurship journey where you didn't know the outcome, you didn't have total confidence, but you just trusted in God and you knew that it was going to work out? And then tell us that story.
I'll give you my biggest one. I was inspired when I was in college after that mistake I told you about to, by God, in a clear moment, I was at a Mothers Against Drunk Driving victim impact panel and was given a vision as I was looking at the little teenage girl's picture that had been killed by a drunk driver, to start something at Texas A&M so that other people wouldn't make the same stupid mistake I'd made. And the journey I went on for the next 12 months was so riddled with people telling me that what I was doing was nice in theory, but would never work, that I needed to stop, that there was entire factions that were trying to shut me down, from the director of the University Police Department to 9 lawyers that oversee the Texas A&M risk management system. And I don't blame any of these people, but everybody said, this is a mistake. It's dangerous. You're going to have cars and kids all over the city during these drunk hours every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. You're not going to be able to afford it. There's incredible liability. There's reputational risk. There's all sorts of stuff. But because God planted it on my heart, I will call this divine revelation and not prophecy. I don't have prophecy. I don't know what's going to happen to you or to this building or whatever. But God revealed something to me that day that was so clear that it couldn't not be so. In other words, like I had a knowingness that wasn't a thoughtfulness or a desire. It was just true, even though nobody else was there when it happened to me. And therefore, as I ran into roadblocks that are impossible, that are literally, you cannot get over them, I prayed and stayed the course. I had a handful of people that stayed right next to me, would pick me up, literally pick me up off the ground and tell me, are you done crying? Now get back out there. You got this and God's got you. My college mentor, Dr. Ben Welch, has seen me cry with my head on the ground. And then when I was done, he'd be like, all right, bub, let's get up. I love you. God loves you. Go get him. I mean, this is every couple weeks he would do this for me. You can't rent cars when you're 20 years old because you have to be 25 and blah, blah, blah. Well, brother, I rented something in the neighborhood of 8,000 cars in 2 years because I ended up figuring out a way for them to give all the car rentals, 16 a weekend, 4 days a week for 36 weeks a year for multiple years. All of them were rented in my name because I convinced them that they needed to take a risk at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And it paid off for them, and it paid off for all the other schools that we ended up taking this to, and it became the largest network of safe ride programs, and the program at A&M became the most successful, giving 300,000 rides in 25 years to people home, only going home, not to other bars, clubs, or parties. So you think about this. Literally, I've sat in a meeting with a bunch of people that were 30 years my senior and had multiple law degrees telling me that they were going to shut me down, and in 90 minutes of me presenting to them the prep we had done and sticking with it as I had the president and the vice president of the university, at the end, the risk management, the head lawyer, looks at the president and goes, hey, we don't like this, but we can't stop him because he's thought of everything and he's not wrong. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So I look over at the president and he says, what are you going to do when the guy from the University Police Department, who's even more against you? I mean, this guy scared me. He had an eye patch, and the university guy, the police department, had an eye patch, and he used to be in the FBI. He goes, what are you going to do when that guy calls you for a ride home? And I'm like, what is this? Is this like a quiz? So I said, I have your phone number. You can go pick him up. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm 20 years old and I'm mouthing off to this huge group of powerful people. And he crumples up my agenda and throws it, and it hits me. And I was like, what? So I look over at my mentor and he goes, you did it, baby. We won. Get up. Let's go. And I was like, all right, let's go. So I faced down something that I will tell you, in every way it's impossible, and it happened. There's a book called Good to Great, right? This is Collins, and it goes through the hedgehog concept and the flywheel, and everything about it I love so much. One of the concepts in there is called the Stockdale paradox, where Admiral Stockdale was in a prisoner of war camp, and everything said that he was going to die there and there's no way out, but he had an undying faith and belief that he was going to get out. And it was just that faith alone that is the only reason he didn't die like many of the people around him. So the paradox is, even though it's impossible, the belief that it is possible and the faith that you're being called to do it is more powerful than the fact that it's impossible.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really powerful. I appreciate this. There's so many things. We ran out of time already, man. I think I've got time for a couple more small things. One thing I really want to understand is your perspective on confidence. You're a very confident person. Did you always feel that way when you were young? Did you develop it somehow? Like, what can people who don't have that do to kind of get to that point?
Yeah, confidence is huge. I watch it in my daughter. She has it. The mini-me version is 11 years old. And she joked with me one day about how her confidence overcomes her lack of knowledge on things. And I said, yep, that's the real world right there. I said, but it'll bite you. So you got to watch out. Did I always have it? No, it was manufactured at different parts of my life. I might be confident in one area and I was faking it in another. But I think through trial and error, I realized that there is not the giant risk on the other side of it, that confidence in something that doesn't work, or confidence that you're going to try something and you don't get it or achieve it, is not a bad place. It's actually a pretty cool place of learning and living and having another memory in the long-term memory bank. So very practically, I would just tell somebody who is struggling with confidence that if you try something or do something or talk to somebody and it doesn't work out, to be new or win or a different relationship, you're really just where you were anyways to begin with. So you've lost nothing, and you probably gained some knowledge about who you are in that process. So not everybody needs to be ready to jump on a microphone like me, but certainly being confident that you're not going to be hurt in some disproportionate way by putting yourself out there is just the risk reward and the probability of that in life. And go back to God. God's never going to turn his back on you. So you can screw up anything and come back and make an honest conversation with God, and you'll find somebody who's ready to love you at all times.
Accepting the fact that there's a backstop, literally, God will never turn your back on us, is kind of scary, because if you actually believe that, you'll do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I have the confidence to do it. All right, I want to end with this. I guess, who are the people that you most look up to in terms of how to live your life, or maybe it's entrepreneurship specifically, but just who are the people that you look up to?
So I'm around celebrities a lot in my life, and I've found that it means nothing to me when I'm around even big names. And I'm sharing that because then I'll see somebody, I'm like, I read that person's book and it formed me. I watched that person give this talk and it formed me. So I already mentioned Andres Wittmer at the Catholic University of America, Dr. Arthur Brooks, who is speaking about happiness, but he's coming at it from a place of faith, even when his audiences don't always know that. He inspires me. Alexander Havard and his work on virtuous leadership inspires me. And these are all men that I've had a chance to encounter at some level or another. And then the people that inspire me, maybe even more than that, are my local heroes who could easily get away with being lauded and cheered because of the size of the checks that they'll write to charities. But what people don't know is these are the same men and women. Bill Sladek is one of them. They're serving at Ronald McDonald House every month for 14 years. They're tutoring junior high kids in math at St. Vincent de Paul. They are scrubbing and refurbishing a home for pregnant homeless women when they could have just paid a crew to come do it and everybody would have said, you're a hero. But it's the people who could get away with having their name on the building and everybody would say they're great, but they write the check and do about 10x the amount of work as anybody else I know. Those are the people that I look to and I say, thanks be to God that this isn't just about money for somebody that it could be.
It's a powerful example because it's basically a perfect imitation of Christ. Christ was the most powerful man, and he didn't necessarily appear it to most people, but he was the most powerful man to ever to walk the earth. Yet he did the lowliest things. And if you're some billionaire and you don't think you can do that, but Jesus did it, you kind of got your head on wrong.
Yeah. You're not more important than Jesus with your time and your energy.
Yeah. No, I love this. This is something I often think about, is that just like the way you would view, or the way a Catholic entrepreneur should be perceived should be different than, like Jeff Bezos or something, because the way that they go about it is, I understand why they do it, but it's kind of like an arrogant way, but it's like there should be something very different if you encounter a Catholic entrepreneur, because regardless of how busy they are, they should always be willing to have that recognition that God puts people in their life, whether they're rich or poor or whatever. God puts people in their life for the reason that we don't even know, right? We're just supposed to be as Christ-like as possible to everybody we encounter along the way, and be willing to stoop to the lowliest of people, right? Man, this has been a really pleasure. I knew this was gonna be good, Jeff. I'm not surprised, but we definitely should do this again. This is really fun. Any last words you'd offer people, or calls to action?
Yeah, I think the call to action that I would give is that because God forgives everything that we've ever done, when we make an earnest appeal in our reconciliation, we need to forgive ourselves and get back in the game. I watch people in fear and shame, in self-doubt, beat themselves up when God has already relieved them of that through the sacrament of reconciliation and through our place as sons and daughters of Christ. And so I would just encourage people to own that we're not bigger than God's forgiveness, and we're not bigger than God's mercy, and we're not bigger than God's providence for us. So feel the fear and do it anyways.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode with Jeff. I know you enjoyed it. I just want to know what you liked about it. So feel free to send kind of the biggest takeaway for you. Send it to us, drop a comment on the Substack, whatever works for you. There are many things that I could say as a takeaway because Jeff is full of wisdom. But I will say, to me, there's one that I think underlines them all, kind of one ring to rule them all, if you will. And that is, live a life that is fully connected to the truth and reality of your life. That one day you will die and you will face God. And when you do, will you be able to look at the time that you spent running your business, building your business, and will you be able to say with confidence that, yes, I spent this end moment, I spent all that time doing that business, running that business, with this very end of my life moment in mind. If you do that, you're going to run a good business, you're going to see the kind of success that you want, and you're going to be very happy with your choices at the end of your life. So that's my biggest takeaway personally. And that's all for now, I guess. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a 5 stars on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen. Share this with somebody that you think will find it enjoyable. You can also follow us on Instagram and YouTube if you like some of the short form content. We're pumping a lot of it out there. And if you have a guest suggestion, feel free to send it our way. Any feedback, we're open to hearing it. If it's negative, please make it private. We'll definitely implement it. But we're always improving, just like Home Depot over here. So thank you so much for sharing this and being part of this journey with us. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.